A blessed day and pleasant morning to everyone. Today we're going to discuss the principles and characteristics of communication as part of our first activity at the course Purposive Communication, mainly the communication process. By the way, I am Kennedy Red, the group moderator. And to start, let me first point out the objectives of our topic. The objectives of our topic is to have an in-depth knowledge as how the communication takes place, to know the fundamentals, principles, and characteristics of communications. Before we start, allow me to introduce the members of Group 1. The group members are Aldrin Troy Casnor, Alexa Hina, Benj Marius Apresto, Gian Vincent Apari, Ian Benedict Jacinto, Jeremy Balbuena, Joan Catherine Pido, Robert Alan Orias, Renato Brosola Jr., Sheena Sangalang, Vanessa Lastimoso, and Kennedy Red. For the first principle and characteristic of communication, here's Mr. Renato Brosola and Mr. Vincent Apari.
It's a mental structure used for organizing the information that a person comes in contact on a daily basis. It is made of traces, symbols, and image record of experience in the brain cells that are recorded and stored recollection. It describes an organized pattern of thought or behavior that organizes categories of information and relationship among them. For example, when a child is young, they develop schema for a dog. They know a dog walks on four legs, hairy, and has tail. When the child goes to the zoo for the first time and sees a tiger, they know initially think that tiger is a dog as well. For the child perspective, the tiger fits their schema for a dog. Then a parent will explain that this is a tiger. A wild animal, it's not a dog because it doesn't bark, it doesn't live in people's house, and hunt for their food after learning the difference between the tiger and the dog. The child will modify their existing schema and create a new. They will accommodate any new information they learn.
The second principle and characteristic of communication will discussed to us by Mr. Robert Alan Orias and Mr. Benj Marius Apresto.
So the second principles and characteristic of communication is an interpretative act. But before that, what is communication? What is the meaning of interpretative? According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, communication is the act or process of using words, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information or to express your ideas, thoughts, and feelings to someone else. And the meaning of interpretative is relating to or providing an interpretation. So now, we already know its meaning. Let's begin in the communication as an interpretative act. The sender or the speaker know the exact meaning of the message. It means that the sender or the speaker as a source has the absolute idea of what the meaning of the message are being transmitted or conveyed. So, why it called interpretative act? It is because the role of receiver or listeners are to interpret, infer, or guess the idea of the message given by the speaker in its own.
And for the third principle, here is Miss Sheena Sangalang and Ian Benedict Jacinto.
Principle of communication says that we cannot assume what others may think unless we engage in a conversation. Communication alone is not enough to know the view of the person we're talking, since it does not guarantee a direct link between the minds. So, in order to know the view of intention of the person, we must build a relation and engage in a conversation concerning to what we want to know or what we want to deliver. What I know and feel about your environment Stay inside yourself except when you decide to convey these peoples around you.
For the fourth principle and characteristic of communication, here's Miss Alexa Hina.
Communication is active, powerful, or forceful. This is the fourth principle and characteristics of communication. First, communication is active. It is engaged in action, or to make it simple, you do it. You exert an effort to make it happen. Because of various reactions, these messages are prone to changes, either positive or negative way. Communication is not stagnant. It is dynamic because changes are the only constant thing in the world. Lastly, communication is powerful or forceful. It can do a lot of things. It is one of the most important intangible assets we have. Each message has a lot of meaning depending on how you express it or how a person will react. According to Joel Austin, you can change your world by changing your words. Remember, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Through our words, we can give or get a life. So it is really important for us to be mindful with our words for us to avoid miscommunication. It is also on our hands for communication to be greatly effective.
And now, for the fifth principle and characteristic of communication, here's Miss Joanne Pido.
Communication involves a sender, a receiver, and the message being shared. In symbolic communication, messages or ideas are shared through symbols. These symbols represent a certain idea we have in our minds. Symbolic communication can be verbal communication or non-verbal communication. Verbal symbols are the messages that are expressed through writing or speaking. An example of this is chatting with your friends or spilling tea. On the other hand, non-verbal symbols are bodily actions. Examples are sign language, facial expressions, and gestures. To differentiate between verbal and non-verbal communication more, here's an example. Instead of saying to people that you are mad, or instead of shouting at them, you can do it non-verbally by simply rolling your eyes at them or clenching your fist. Communication being symbolic is important because it makes the communication system accessible. This symbolic communication is communicating without the need to respond verbally. With that said, it is important in our world because not every person can communicate verbally and just uses sign language to communicate. For example, are the people with communication disorders like mute and deaf people.
Finally, here's the sixth principle and characteristics of communication with Miss Vanessa Lastimosa and Mr. Jeremy Balbuena.
Communication is always result in something. The purpose of communication is to elicit a reaction and alter behavior. The sender's ability to express their thoughts effectively and the recipient's ability to hear them with understanding are the most crucial components. Every day, we interact with practically everyone in our immediate vicinity. There are always good results and bad results in communication. Building trust. Effective communication fosters trust with others. Your ability to listen attentively and embrace different points of view helps others trust that you are making optimal decisions for everyone in the group. As you serve as a role model, this trust will extend to your team and they will feel as though they can trust their teammates to fulfill their duties and responsibilities. Preventing or resolving problems. Disputes can be resolved and potential conflicts can be avoided in large part by having strong communication skills. Remaining composed. Making sure all parties are heard and coming up with a plan that works best for everyone involved are the keys.
In conclusion, communication is possible if the people involved has the prior knowledge about a certain ideas. However, effective communication are not always guaranteed, but through proper interpretation and openness of mind, communications can be meaningful.